Chapter 1. Cast into the Void. In the unfathomable vastness of the galaxy, where cold stars twinkled like distant fires swallowed by darkness, the slave ship Eclipse drifted silently, a specter haunting the black corridors of space. Its massive, grimy frame bore scars of countless battles and the weight of unspeakable atrocities committed within its cold, iron guts. The Eclipse was more than just a ship. It was a prison, a hellish vessel ferrying the lost and broken, the forgotten and condemned, chained and broken in body and spirit, destined to be sold like cattle to the highest bidder. Deep within its hold, where artificial light flickered weakly against the oppressive shadows, Kayla lay shackled in heavy restraints forged from rare alloys that hummed faintly with anti-escape enchantments. She was a Virelian, a once proud warrior race known across several star systems for their strength, resilience, and fierce independence. But all of that had been stolen from her now. She was nothing but a slave to her captors, stripped of dignity, thrust into a grim future of servitude and brutality. Her lithe body was battered and bruised, the faint glow of her bioluminescent skin dulled under layers of grime and pain. Her eyes, however, burned fiercely with a fire that refused to be extinguished, a spark of rebellion flickering in the depths of her weary gaze. The Virelians had been torn from their homeworld decades ago, victims of a merciless campaign by the Triarch Dominion, a coalition of ruthless warlords who ravaged planets for slaves, resources, and blood money. Kayla's own family had been slaughtered during the initial invasions, her tribe scattered like ash in the cosmic wind. Her capture was brutal, a bitter culmination of endless fighting and heartbreak. Yet even in chains she had clung stubbornly to hope, to the dream of freedom, and to the promise of vengeance. The Eclipse was nearing a notorious outpost in the Orion Expanse, where shadowy slave markets thrived under the watchful eyes of corrupt officials and mercenaries eager to profit from misery. The captain of the ship, a cold-hearted human mercenary known only as Garrus Vol, was a man whose greed overshadowed any hint of compassion. Vol cared nothing for the fates of the beings under his control, only for the credits that flowed into his coffers. Kayla had become a liability after sustaining a severe injury during a botched escape attempt. Her captors feared she would slow their progress, attract unwanted attention, or inspire rebellion among the other captives. After a brief but ruthless council, Vol made the cruel decision to dispose of her, a move that would have been fatal to any other being, but one that fate would twist in Kayla's favor. As the Eclipse lurched into hyperspace near a remote sector, Vol's order was given. The hold's reinforced hatch to the ejector bay slid open with a mechanical screech, and Kayla was dragged half-conscious, chained, and bloody toward the void beyond. The cold, merciless vacuum of space awaited her, a silent assassin ready to claim her life without ceremony. Vol's mercenaries hesitated, some pitying the doomed alien woman, others indifferent. But fear and greed silenced their hearts. No one dared oppose the captain's command. With a final shove, Kayla was expelled into the endless blackness, tumbling through the void with only the stars to witness her fall. The cold gnawed at her skin, her lungs screamed for air that did not exist, and the crushing silence threatened to swallow her whole. In those moments, life and death danced precariously on a razor's edge. But destiny, often cruel and unpredictable, had another design. Nearby, a human starship named the Endeavor was conducting patrols on a mission to protect isolated colonies from piracy and slavers. Commanded by Captain Marcus Hayes, a veteran of countless battles and a man whose reputation for integrity was as formidable as his tactical brilliance, the Endeavor was not just a warship, but a beacon of hope for many. The ship's sensors picked up the sudden anomaly, a small life form drifting uncontrollably in space. Recognizing the urgent danger, Marcus ordered an immediate rescue operation. Within minutes, the Endeavor's rescue pods had been deployed, cutting through the void with purpose and precision. Kayla was found barely clinging to life, frostbite spreading across her exposed skin, wounds open and vulnerable, but her heartbeat was steady, a stubborn defiance of death. The rescue crew brought her aboard with careful hands, shielding her from the deadly vacuum and wrapping her in thermal blankets. As the medical team worked feverishly to stabilize her, Marcus stood nearby, his eyes reflecting a mix of awe and concern. Here was a being who should have perished, yet by some miracle or design, she had been spared. When she finally awoke, the alien woman's gaze met his with a mix of suspicion and fear, her voice hoarse as she spoke in broken common tongue, asking for life, for mercy, for something beyond the chains that had defined her existence. Marcus understood then that she was no ordinary prisoner or victim. She was a warrior in the making, waiting for a chance to rise again. Over the weeks that followed, Kayla's recovery was painstaking. The Endeavor's medics battled infection, repaired broken bones, and soothed the psychological scars etched deep within her mind. Nightmares plagued her sleep, vivid memories of chains, fire, and blood-stained halls threatening to overwhelm her fragile hope. Yet, beneath the surface, her spirit remained unyielding. Marcus often found himself sitting by her side in the quiet hours, sharing stories of Earth, of humanity's struggles and triumphs, and of the hope that lay in unity and resilience. For Kayla, this was a revelation. She had never known kindness on the slave ship, only cruelty. Now, aboard this vessel, she tasted a different kind of power, the power to heal, to rebuild, and to fight not just for survival, but for justice. The Endeavor's crew, initially wary of the alien stranger aboard their ship, began to see the strength simmering beneath her fragile exterior. Kayla learned their language quickly, her mind sharp and eager despite the trauma. She trained relentlessly, testing her limits under the watchful eye of the ship's combat instructors and Marcus himself. With each day, the chains that once bound her to despair fell away, replaced by the forging of a warrior's resolve. Marcus understood that Kayla's survival was not a mere act of chance, it was the beginning of something far greater. A human had saved a Virelian slave thrown to die, but in doing so, he had also sparked the rise of a force that would challenge the cruelty of the galaxy's darkest corners. The Endeavor was no longer just a ship, it was the cradle of a legend. Days bled into weeks, yet Kayla's body and soul endured the slow, agonizing process of healing aboard the Endeavor. The ship's sterile corridors, once alien and intimidating, became the strange but welcoming sanctuary where her battered flesh was mended and her shattered spirit slowly stitched back together. The medics marveled at her resilience. Wounds that should have left permanent scars were fading faster than expected, her bioluminescent skin beginning to regain its subtle, radiant glow as life pulsed anew beneath the surface. But the most remarkable change was not physical, it was the fire that now burned brighter within her eyes, a spark that no chains or cruelty could ever truly extinguish. She was no longer a broken slave, thrown to die in the void. She was a survivor, a warrior being reborn from the ashes of despair. Captain Marcus Hayes watched her transformation with a mixture of pride and resolve. The man who had once been a hardened soldier, cynical from years of war and loss, found himself drawn into an unexpected mission not of conquest or survival, but of redemption and hope. He saw in Kayla a mirror of humanity's own struggles, the will to rise, the courage to fight against the odds, and the strength to reclaim one's dignity. He made a promise, unspoken but unwavering, that he would not let her become just another forgotten casualty of galactic brutality. He offered her something more valuable than credits or weapons, a chance at freedom, a family, and a purpose beyond mere survival. Kayla, for her part, was cautious. Trust was a currency she could scarcely afford to spend freely, especially after the cruelty she had endured. Yet, Marcus's consistent kindness and the quiet strength of the Endeavor's crew chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. Slowly, she began to share fragments of her story, the horrors of capture, the loss of her homeworld, the torment of slavery, and the fleeting dreams of vengeance that kept her alive. Her voice was often tinged with sorrow, but also with an undeniable fierceness that spoke of battles yet to be fought. The crew listened, learning not just about Kayla's past, but about the dark underbelly of the galaxy, the twisted trade routes, the merciless slavers, and the innocent lives crushed beneath the wheels of greed. In those quiet moments, Kayla realized that her survival was no accident, it was a catalyst. The Endeavor was more than a rescue ship, it was a beacon for those who had been cast aside, and Marcus was a leader willing to stand against the tide of darkness. With their guidance, she began to train with a dedication that bordered on obsession. The The ship's simulation rooms became her battlegrounds, where she honed her reflexes, mastered alien combat techniques, and pushed her body beyond its limits. Every strike, every maneuver was a step toward reclaiming her identity not as a slave, but as a warrior. The scars on her skin became badges of honor, the memories of pain fuel for the fire that would one day burn through the chains of oppression. And so, in the cold depths of space, aboard a ship that had saved her from death's icy grip, Kayla's journey began anew. She was no longer a discarded slave but a force awakening, a storm gathering strength beneath calm waters. The galaxy was vast and filled with peril, but for the first time in a long while, she was ready not just to survive, but to fight, to lead, and to change the fate of those like her. The shadows that lurked beyond the stars would soon learn that throwing a warrior into the void only forged a legend. Chapter 2: Forging a Warrior. The transformation of Kayla from a broken slave to a fierce warrior was not instantaneous. It was a relentless, grueling process shaped by discipline, pain, and the unwavering belief of those who stood by her side. The Endeavor sailed through star systems thick with danger and deceit, each mission bringing new challenges that tested Kayla's resolve and skill. Under the tutelage of the ship's veteran combat instructors, she learned to wield not only her natural agility and strength, but also to master advanced human and alien weaponry, tactics, and the art of strategy. The corridors of the Endeavor echoed with the sounds of her training grunts of exertion, the clash of simulated blades, and the steady rhythm of determination beating against doubt. Captain Marcus Hayes remained a steady presence in her life, more mentor than savior, pushing her to break beyond the limits of her pain and doubt. He shared with her the stories of humanity's darkest wars and greatest victories, of how ordinary men and women had risen against impossible odds to forge a future worth fighting for. To Kayla, these stories were lessons in resilience and hope, mirrors of her own buried potential waiting to be unleashed. Marcus never demanded loyalty through orders alone. He earned it through respect, compassion, and the quiet assurance that she was more than a soldier or a symbol. She was a daughter of the stars, destined to carve her own path. Yet, the scars of her past were never far behind. Nightmares haunted her rest, the echoes of chains and screams threatening to consume her will. At times, doubt crept in: was she truly free, or merely another pawn in a larger game? But each time despair threatened to claim her, the crew of the Endeavor rallied around her. They saw her not just as a survivor, but as a beacon of defiance against a galaxy blinded by cruelty. The ship itself, a vessel forged in human ingenuity and compassion, became a symbol of rebellion and sanctuary for the lost and oppressed. And Kayla, with every strike and every victory, became its living heart, a warrior born not from privilege but from fire. Their journey brought them to the edges of known space, where whispers of slave raids and oppression grew louder. Kayla's desire for justice ignited into a burning purpose. The Endeavor would not only save the few, but challenge the system itself, the merciless trade that enslaved millions and shattered civilizations. Plans began to form: raids on slave convoys, liberation missions, and gathering allies among those who had suffered. Kayla's story, once one of abandonment and despair, became a rallying cry. Her name whispered in hushed reverence across starports and hidden settlements, a symbol of hope rising from the darkness. As the Endeavor prepared for its first strike against a notorious slaver fleet, Kayla stood on the ship's observation deck, gazing into the swirling cosmos. The stars stretched infinitely, each one a world teeming with stories yet to be told. She felt the weight of her past and the promise of her future intertwined, a tapestry of pain and power. In that moment, she understood that her survival was more than fate, it was a call to arms. The warrior she had become would no longer be a victim of the galaxy's cruelty, but its fiercest storm. The days leading up to their first assault on the slave fleet were charged with a palpable tension that rippled through the Endeavor. The crew moved with precision, their years of experience tempered by the weight of the mission before them. For Kayla, every moment was a test not just of skill, but of the iron will that now defined her existence. Each dawn brought another grueling training session, where her body was pushed beyond its limits, and her mind sharpened like a blade forged in fire. The instructors taught her the nuances of human warfare, the coordinated strikes, the unyielding discipline, and the merciless efficiency required to dismantle a well-oiled slaver operation. Yet, Kayla's alien heritage lent her an edge no human could replicate. Her reflexes were lightning fast, her instincts honed from a lifetime surviving brutal hunts and battles on her homeworld. Together, human and Varillian tactics blended into something formidable and unpredictable. Marcus watched her with a growing respect, seeing not just the warrior in training, but the leader emerging from the ashes of suffering. He knew that this mission was more than a strike against cruelty. It was the crucible in which Kayla's destiny would be forged. His briefings were candid. The enemy was brutal, their fleets armed with deadly weapons and staffed by mercenaries whose loyalty was as fleeting as the credits they chased. There was no room for mercy, no space for hesitation. But there was also hope that one strike could ripple into a revolution, hope that Kayla could inspire others to rise and reclaim their stolen lives. The Endeavor was no longer just a ship, it was the spearhead of a rebellion, and Kayla its burning tip. The night before the operation, Kayla stood alone on the observation deck, the stars stretched like a glittering sea before her. The cold vacuum of space was a cruel mirror to the emptiness she once felt inside. Yet now, beneath the vast canopy of galaxies, she felt something she had not known in years: purpose. The memory of chains and betrayal burned in her mind, fueling a silent vow that echoed louder than any battle cry. She was no longer the discarded slave girl tossed into the void. She was a warrior, a liberator, and a symbol of defiance against the merciless darkness that plagued the cosmos. Her heart beat steady, her breath calm, and in the quiet solitude, she prepared herself to face the storm. When the Endeavor's sensors finally detected the slaver convoy, a ragtag fleet of corvettes and frigates escorting a flotilla of prison transports, Kayla was ready. The bridge buzzed with activity as Captain Marcus issued commands with practiced authority, the crew synchronized in purpose. The attack was swift and brutal. The Endeavor struck from the shadows, disabling communications and targeting slave holds with surgical precision. Kayla led a boarding team, her presence a fierce whirlwind of skill and determination as they stormed through the enemy vessel's corridors. The cries of the freed captives, the shouts of the stunned slavers, and the clang of combat weapons filled the air. For many of the prisoners, it was the first taste of freedom in a lifetime. For Kayla, it was the first strike in a war she had been born to fight. As the last chains fell and the prisoners were secured, Kayla stood amidst the wreckage, the weight of her journey settling heavily on her shoulders. This was only the beginning. Each liberated soul was a testament to the cruelty they fought against and a reminder of the countless others still shackled in darkness. The rebellion she ignited aboard the Endeavor would grow, fueled by the hope she embodied and the fierce fire she carried in her heart. She was no longer a victim, no longer cast into the void. She was a warrior, rising from the stars to change the fate of the galaxy itself. The victory against the slave convoy sent ripples through the underworld of the Orion expanse and beyond. News of the Endeavor's raid, led by the enigmatic Varillian warrior, spread quickly among the oppressed and the powerful alike. Kayla's name became a whispered legend in hidden bazaars, secret meeting halls, and the cramped quarters of rebel cells scattered across countless star systems. For the first time in decades, the helpless felt hope, and the cruel felt the creeping chill of fear. But with victory came the weight of responsibility. Kayla was no longer simply a survivor or a fighter. She was a symbol, a beacon that would attract not only allies but enemies eager to snuff out the flame before it ignited a revolution. Aboard the Endeavor, the days after the raid were filled with intense activity. Freed captives were cared for, new recruits trained, and intelligence gathered on the sprawling network of slavers and warlords who profited from misery. Kayla, once a lone survivor cast aside, found herself at the heart of this growing rebellion. She bore the physical and emotional scars of her past, but now those scars shaped her resolve. The alien warrior was driven by a fierce determination to dismantle the chains that bound so many, and the Endeavor became the crucible where that determination was tempered into strategy and strength. Captain Marcus Hayes stood firmly beside her, guiding the fledgling leader through the complexities of galactic politics and warfare. He understood the burden Kayla carried. Her rage was tempered by wisdom born of pain, and her desire for vengeance fueled a vision of justice that transcended personal survival. Together, they forged alliances with disenfranchised planets, rogue mercenaries, and forgotten militias, creating a coalition capable of challenging even the mightiest of empires. The Endeavor was no longer just a rescue ship. It was a command center for a growing resistance, and Kayla's role was evolving beyond warrior to that of strategist and symbol. But the path was perilous. Every mission deepened the wounds she carried, and the shadow of the Triarch Dominion loomed ever larger, its reach vast and ruthless. Despite the hardships, Kayla's spirit remained unyielding. She trained daily, honing her skills and embracing leadership with a fierce grace that inspired all who followed her. The warrior forged in the vacuum of space was ready to face the darkest forces of the galaxy, but she also grappled with the fragile threads of her own humanity, her longing for connection, trust, and a home where she was more than a soldier. The Endeavor and its crew became her family, a sanctuary amid the chaos. In their acceptance, she found strength. In their faith, she found purpose. The war ahead was daunting, but Kayla was no longer alone. Together, they would fight to reclaim freedom for the countless souls still trapped in darkness. Chapter 3: The Price of Freedom. The galaxy's vastness was both a refuge and a battleground, and as the Endeavor sailed deeper into contested space, Kayla felt the true cost of the rebellion she had ignited. Every victory was hard-won, marked by sacrifice and loss. The slavers and warlords struck back with brutal efficiency, unleashing fleets and mercenaries to crush the rising resistance. The Endeavor became a target, its corridors stained with the echoes of battles fought in shadow and flame. Kayla faced foes not only in the stars, but within herself, the ghosts of her past, the weight of leadership, and the haunting question of what freedom truly meant. The warrior's transformation was not without cost. Nights were restless, haunted by memories of chains and screams, of betrayal and abandonment. The faces of those she had failed to save flickered in her mind, a relentless reminder of the stakes. Yet, in the darkest hours, it was the faces of her new family aboard the Endeavor that anchored her, a crew bound by loyalty, courage, and hope. Marcus's steady presence was a balm to her restless spirit. His unyielding belief in her strength and purpose became a guiding light. Together, they planned the next phase of their campaign, a daring strike at the heart of the Triarch Dominion's slave trade, a gamble that could either shatter their enemies or doom the rebellion. Kayla's resolve hardened as she prepared for the mission. She trained with renewed intensity, pushing her body and mind beyond exhaustion, knowing that failure was not an option. The weight of countless lives rested on her shoulders, but she refused to let it crush her. In the cold steel of the Endeavor's armory, she found solace and purpose, sharpening her blades and calibrating weapons with meticulous care. The warrior was ready not just to fight, but to lead, to inspire, and to claim the freedom that had been stolen from her and so many others. As the ship approached the Dominion's stronghold, tension crackled in the air. The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome uncertain. But Kayla's heart burned with a fierce hope, a conviction that the chains of the past could be broken, and a new dawn could rise from the darkness. The battle ahead would test everything she had become, but she was no longer the girl thrown to die in the void. She was a warrior forged in fire, a beacon of freedom, and the galaxy would never forget her name. As the Endeavor slipped through the nebula-shrouded corridors of contested space, the silence of the ship was thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, but beneath the calm exterior lay a collective tension. Every soul aboard knew that what lay ahead could change everything or end everything. Kayla stood on the bridge, her lithe frame silhouetted against the star-streaked viewport, eyes narrowing as the coordinates for the Triarch Dominion's primary slave trade hub flickered on the tactical display. This was no mere raid. It was a declaration of war against the darkest heart of oppression. The weight of the lives they carried, those freed and those yet imprisoned, pressed on her chest like the gravity wells of the distant stars outside. But beneath that weight was a fierce determination, burning hotter than any supernova. Failure was a luxury they could not afford. The Dominion's stronghold was a fortress built from cruelty and cold ambition, a vast station orbiting a dead planet whose surface was scarred from centuries of exploitation. It was rumored to be impregnable, guarded by fleets of warships and legions of mercenaries loyal only to gold and power. Yet Kayla knew the truth. No fortress, no matter how vast or well-defended, could contain the hunger for freedom. The Endeavor's assault plan was daring and intricate, relying on stealth, precision, and the element of surprise. Kayla was to lead a boarding party through a narrow service hatch, infiltrate the holding cells, and liberate as many captives as possible before the Dominion's forces could respond. The margin for error was razor-thin, and every second counted. As the countdown to battle ticked down, Kayla's mind raced through contingencies, every scenario rehearsed, every detail memorized. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for an entire galaxy's hope. The initial strike shattered the quiet of space like a thunderclap. The Endeavor's stealth drones disabled external defenses, slicing through the station's electronic eyes and ears, plunging parts of the fortress into darkness. The boarding party deployed swiftly, slipping through the shadows like ghosts. Inside the labyrinthine corridors of the station, Kayla moved with lethal grace, every step measured, every breath controlled. The stench of fear and despair clung to the air, the muffled cries of imprisoned souls driving her forward. She encountered resistance guards clad in black armor, their faces obscured behind cruel visors, each battle a brutal test of skill and will. The clang of blades, the flash of energy weapons, and the sharp scent of burning circuits filled the narrow halls. Kayla's fury was a tempest, her strikes precise and devastating, carving a path through the enemy ranks. But the price of freedom was steep. The Dominion's forces were relentless, sending reinforcements through corridors and vent shafts, their firepower overwhelming. The tide of battle ebbed and flowed, and the cost in blood was high. Kayla watched comrades fall, their sacrifices searing her soul even as it steeled her resolve. The faces of those lost both ally and captive etched themselves into her memory, a relentless reminder that the fight was far from over. The station's alarms blared, echoing a grim countdown, and Kayla knew their window to escape was shrinking. With the last group of freed captives gathered, she signaled for extraction, her heart pounding not just with adrenaline, but with the knowledge that every victory carried the weight of those left behind. As they boarded the Endeavor's shuttle and fled the collapsing station, Kayla stared out at the distant stars and vowed that this was only the beginning. The price of freedom was high, but the cost of surrender was higher still. She was no longer the discarded slave of the void. She was a warrior whose fight would echo across the galaxy. The aftermath of the assault on the Dominion stronghold left the Endeavor and its crew battered but unbroken. The stolen lives they had freed were now a solemn reminder of the brutality still entrenched deep within the galaxy's darkest corners. Among the survivors were shattered souls, many too traumatized to speak, their eyes haunted by horrors that no words could capture. Kayla moved among them quietly, her presence both fierce and comforting. She knew the path ahead would be long and arduous, filled with battles not just against external enemies, but against the scars that slavery etched into the heart and mind. The cost of liberation was never measured solely in victories or casualties. It was measured in the fragile hope that each freed captive dared to nurture despite the shadows that threatened to engulf them. Captain Marcus Hayes gathered his officers in the dim glow of the strategy room. Their faces were etched with fatigue, determination, and the unspoken knowledge that the Triarch Dominion would not surrender easily. Intelligence reports streamed in warnings of increased patrols, mercenary bounties placed on their heads, and whispers of political machinations aimed at crushing the rebellion before it could spread. Yet amidst the looming threats, the crew found strength in Kayla's leadership. Her transformation from a discarded slave to a symbol of resistance was complete. She stood not only as a warrior, but as a beacon of hope, the embodiment of a future where chains could be broken and the oppressed could rise. The war was far from over, and Kayla understood that the fight was no longer just hers or even the Endeavor's. It was a galactic struggle for the soul of countless worlds. The alliance they forged was fragile but growing, a tapestry of disparate groups united by a shared dream of freedom. But the price of such dreams was steep, demanding sacrifices that would test the limits of loyalty, courage, and humanity itself. As the Endeavor prepared for its next mission, Kayla stood once more on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and indifferent, yet within its endless night, she had found a purpose brighter than any star, a purpose that would guide her through the darkness ahead. Chapter 4: Rising from the Ashes. The war that followed was fierce and unrelenting. Kayla, now a seasoned leader and warrior, guided the Endeavor and its allies through countless battles across star systems, each victory a step toward dismantling the cruel slave networks that plagued the galaxy. The rebellion grew, fueled by the courage of those who dared to fight back and the relentless spirit of a warrior who had been cast into the void and risen anew. But with each victory came new challenges, betrayals within their ranks, political intrigue from powerful empires wary of upheaval, and the constant shadow of loss that haunted every step. The cost of freedom was paid in blood and sacrifice, yet Kayla's resolve never wavered. In the crucible of war, she forged bonds that transcended species and origin. The Endeavor became a sanctuary for the lost, a symbol of resistance, and a home for those who believed in a future without chains. Marcus remained her steadfast ally, their partnership a blend of mutual respect, trust, and unspoken understanding born from shared battles and scars. Together, they faced the galaxy's darkness, lighting a path for others to follow. Kayla's journey from discarded slave to legendary warrior became a story told in whispers and songs, inspiring generations to rise against tyranny. As the final battle approached, the forces of the rebellion stood united against the might of the Triarch Dominion. The clash was cataclysmic, shaking the very foundations of the galaxy. Amidst the chaos, Kayla led her warriors with fierce determination, her every strike a testament to the fire that had been kindled within her. The tide turned as the Dominion's grip weakened, its fleets shattered, and its leaders brought to justice. The chains of slavery were broken, not just by weapons, but by the indomitable will of those who refused to be broken. In the aftermath, Kayla looked out upon a galaxy forever changed. The scars of war remained, but so did the hope she had fought to ignite. She had been thrown into the void to die, but instead, she had risen a warrior, a leader, a symbol of freedom. The stars above shone brighter now, reflecting the light of a new era forged from the ashes of the old. And as Kayla stood on the deck of the Endeavor, surrounded by those she had saved and those who had saved her, she knew that her fight had only just begun. The dust of the final battle had barely settled when the Endeavor drifted quietly among the shattered remnants of the Triarch Dominion's flagship, a towering monolith of cruelty and oppression now reduced to twisted metal and silence. The weight of victory was heavy in the air, but so was a profound sense of loss. The faces of fallen comrades haunted every corner of the ship, heroes who had given everything for a chance at freedom. Kayla stood on the observation deck, the pale light of distant stars casting soft shadows across her resolute features. The girl who had once been thrown into the void to die was now a legend, her name whispered with reverence across countless worlds. Yet, victory was bittersweet. The galaxy they fought for was fractured, its wounds deep and raw, and the work of healing was just beginning. Captain Marcus Hayes approached her quietly, his gaze steady and filled with unspoken understanding. "We won," he said simply, but Kayla knew that beneath those words lay 1,000 unvoiced truths. The war was over, but the struggle for justice, for rebuilding, and for peace would stretch across years and generations. They had dismantled the slave trade, but the scars left by centuries of suffering would not fade overnight. Together, they had ignited a flame of hope, but it was a fragile light that demanded protection, nurturing, and unwavering vigilance. In the months that followed, the Endeavor became a traveling sanctuary, a beacon of renewal for those who had been enslaved, broken, and cast aside. Kayla's leadership evolved from that of a warrior to a stateswoman and symbol of resilience. She traveled from planet to planet, rallying survivors, fostering alliances, and helping rebuild shattered communities. The galaxy began to heal, tentative but determined. Former captives found their voices, former slaves became leaders, and the legacy of oppression gave way to stories of survival and rebirth. Kayla's journey from a discarded slave to a legendary warrior was no longer just her own, had become the story of an entire galaxy reclaiming its freedom. Yet, despite the accolades and the honors, Kayla remained humble. Her greatest strength was born not from conquest, but from compassion, the knowledge that freedom was not merely the absence of chains, but the presence of hope, dignity, and belonging. On the deck of the Endeavor, surrounded by a crew that had become her family, she looked out at the stars with a quiet smile. The warrior who had been cast into the void to die had risen, unbroken and unbowed, to become a beacon of light in the darkness. Her fight had forged a new legacy, not just of survival, but of transformation, courage, and the unyielding power of the human spirit intertwined with the fierce soul of a Varillian warrior. As the galaxy moved forward, forever changed by the tides of war and the rise of unlikely heroes, Kayla knew one truth above all: she would never be discarded again. She had been thrown into the void to die, but instead, she had been raised by humanity to become a warrior, one who would fight for freedom, justice, and hope for as long as stars lit the night.